Okay, so we have all of our grade points figured out for our front and our back. Let's do our sleeve, and then we're going to talk about positives and negatives. So on our sleeve, for our sleeve length, we have 1/8 of an inch. Typically with sleeves, we don't grade at the bottom unless it's like a men's shirt that has specified sleeve lengths, like inseam lengths for pants. All of our grade is going to come from the cap. So we're not actually going to grade anything from the bottom, the sleeve opening, okay? So for our sleeve cap, we're going to go ahead and put this 1/8 of an inch grade in there. It's out of the way here, okay? So I'm going to take this 1/8, 1/8, 1/8 in the X direction for our sleeve cap, okay? There's no Y movement for our sleeve cap. It should remain centered. For our bicep and sleeve opening, so for our short sleeve shirt, our bicep and sleeve opening were the same because they're so close together. But today, our bicep and sleeve opening are slightly different. Yes, so they both go down 1/2 an inch, but the bicep grows 5/8 on the large and extra large sizes, okay? So I'm taking both of these measurements, the bicep and the sleeve opening, I'm dividing them by 2 because I want 1/2 of the movement on this side and 1/2 of the movement on this side. So I am going to, let's see, just put this here for template's sake. All right, so I have, for my bicep, I have 1/2 an inch going down, so that's going to be 1/4, and I have 5/8 going up, which is, what is that, 5/16? Sorry, 5/8, 0.625. Yeah, so this is 5/16, and this is 5/16, like 0.3125. Okay. All right, and then I'm going to put the same thing on this side, right? So same movements on both sides, so our sleeve stays symmetrical. And then for my sleeve opening, it's just a 1/2 inch, 1/2 inch, 1/2 inch. So that means I want 1/4, 1/4, 1/4, 1/4, right? All right, so that's our sleeve, okay? Sometimes when we get into more advanced grading, we'll add grade points at our sleeve cap sides. But oftentimes, just like we did with the armhole where we do a manual edit delta to kind of alter the curve, we may do that on these points as well, but we're not going to indicate a grade point for today. All right. So let's talk about positives and negatives. Oops. So we've got our movements down, but as you know with grade, when we look at our graded nests grow in and out, right? So our smaller sizes might look like this, right? And let's see if I can do this. Okay. Our larger sizes are going to grow outside of our body. Sorry, this has like a box around it. I don't know why they come in from AccuMark like that. Okay, so like our smaller sizes might look like this, right? This is not exact at all, but just to kind of give you the visual of growing versus shrinking, our bigger sizes might look like this, right? Okay, so what we have to figure out, so we're talking about going inside a piece and outside a piece, but the orientation of the piece matters, right? So if my piece is flipped over, the growing and the shrinking go in opposite directions, okay? So we have to think about our XY axis when we do these growth amounts, okay? So on our XY axis, we have, this is our plus X, right? This is our negative X. I don't know why I did that. Why is that? Okay, so these are our positives, right? So this movement this way is positive X. This movement this way is positive Y. This movement this way is negative X, and this movement this way is negative Y, okay? So as we're looking at these movements, and whether we're going inside or outside of the piece, we have to then translate that to a positive or a negative X or Y movement, okay? So for example, starting with our widths here. So with the bust waist sweep, our smaller sizes are going inside of our piece, which according to our grid is negative Y, right? So that means our smaller sizes are going to be negative direction, right? And then our bigger sizes are going outside of the piece. That's a positive Y movement. So these are going to be positive 3/8, positive 3/8, okay? So that's going to be the case for both bust, waist, and hip, right? The other thing to consider when we're doing this is that when you're adding grade rules, you have to make sure your piece is oriented the same way that your grade rules were created, okay? That's why it's so important that we have a schematic to go with every rule table that we create, okay? So for the cross front, cross back, our piece is still oriented this way, so it's going to be the same, right? So our smaller sizes are going to be negative and our larger sizes are going to be positive, okay, for both of these. This is often the case where the smaller sizes are negative. However, we'll go, and I'll show you in just a second, a case in which that is not always the case. So same here, right? Our neck width is moving this way. It's getting larger for the larger sizes, and it's moving this way, which is negative for the smaller sizes. So for our length movements, here, our shoulder is going inside of the piece for the smaller sizes. So that's going to be a negative X movement. Okay, so we have negative and negative, and then positive and positive. So it's going to be the same for our front neck drop. However, when we look at our bottom opening, our smaller sizes are moving this direction, right? They're moving inside of the piece, and that direction is positive. So in this case, because we're working on the other side of our pattern, our larger sizes are actually going to be our negative movements, okay? So that is why the orientation matters so much, and that is why it matters that you draw this out before you create rule tables. I still, to this day, when I create new rule tables, have to draw out. Sometimes I just do it on paper, but so that I make sure I understand how my movements are working, okay? So once we have these positive and negatives, then we're ready to add it to the rule table. But again, we really, really have to understand what X movements there are, what Y movements there are, how those X and Y movements might affect another X or Y movement, like our neck drops, and whether those movements are positive or negative based on the way the piece is oriented, okay? Another example of the positive and negative is this bicep and sleeve opening. So if we tried to put the same rule number on both of these sides, it's not going to work, okay? So in this case, on this side of my bicep, my larger sizes are growing outside of my piece, and that's up, which is a positive. So on this side, my smaller sizes, my extra small and my small, are growing in a negative direction, right, inside of the piece. However, on this side, my smaller sizes are going inside of my piece, which is up, which is positive. So on this side, it's going to be the flip. It's going to be the reverse of what my other side is, okay? So typically when you have movements that are growing on two sides of the body, so lengths, or in this case, like your stacking point is in the center of your body, one side will be positive, negative, the other side will be flipped positive or negative, okay? All right, so these are the rules that we will now add to our rule table. So one last thing that we need to do before we go start adding these to the rule table is we need to assign rule numbers. So before I get into my rule table, I like to go ahead and create a rule number and go ahead and make up an order, okay? So I'm going to start with 2 at my front neck drop. So those of you that are in my class know that I always reserve my 1 rule for no movements. I call it a hold point. So it has a 0x and a 0y movement. There are cases in which that's going to be more efficient than trying to clear X or clear Y. So I like to reserve the 1 for that always, okay? So I'm going to start with 2. I'm going to move to 3 here, okay? And I'm going to go around my piece like this. All right. So the other thing to consider is that in a lot of cases, your front and your back are going to have the same rule. So you don't have to create that many rules. I think this shirt ends up with maybe 14 rules or so, okay? Our waist, I'm actually going to just skip our waist because we don't have any waist suppression in this particular pattern, and so we don't really necessarily need to do that grade. The waist is also helpful when your bust and your sweep are different. You like to indicate what the waist is because otherwise it'll just take kind of an average. Okay, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to go ahead and take all of these numbers and put them in my back pattern, okay? So the only one that's going to be different is my back neck drop. So my back neck drop has a different grade on my back than my front. So in this case, I'm going to, since these are already determined, I'm going to take the next number, which is 9, and put that there at my back neck drop, okay? And then on my sleeve, I'm going to take, I'm going to start with the next number, which is 10. Okay, and then it doesn't matter which side you start on with the bicep, is so long as you indicate it in your rule table. So I'm going to say this is 11 and this is 12. You can do it in whatever order you want to. I will just note that I don't know if Paul told every class that came to visit this, but I asked him how he manages rules for all the brands that he does. And he said that he's created essentially a method like this where he has specific rule numbers that always go in the same position. So say the 2 is always the front neck drop. Then he can create a new rule table for every brand, but he and all of his employees know that the 2 rule is always the front neck drop. So each brand might have a different front neck drop grade, but when you're actually applying the rules to the pattern, if the rule number is always in the same position, you don't necessarily have to have the schematic in front of you. So you just start to get to know, if you're grading 10 patterns a day, you know 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, right? So there is some method that can be applied to how these grade rules are applied. For today, follow this or do how you want to do, so long as you have it recorded, and then you can use this when you're actually applying the rules to your pattern.